Would you give them a warm, warm welcome to Belfast? Let's welcome Krish Dunham. Krish, to get the ball rolling, is it true that you arrived in the United States with $9 in your pocket?
Well, that is a fact. I started in India with 20, and they told me it was a land of the free, so I spent 11 in Frankfurt.
The rest is history. Krish, we await you.
Thanks. Well, of all the introductions I've received, Paul, that was the most recent. Greetings. I live in Dallas, Texas now, and I moved to the United States in 1986 with the aforementioned $9 in my pocket. Somewhere along the way, a transformation happened, but I was raised with a different worldview, and we moved along. But before we get into the context of what I'm supposed to say and share with you, I would like to just give you some anecdotal references. For those of you who are wondering about time, in the words of the late Elizabeth Taylor, to one of her many husbands, I promise you, I won't keep you long. It's been said that every third person in this world is either amazingly beautiful and unusually bright, incredibly handsome and unfailingly brilliant. So take a good look at the person on your left. Go ahead. Now take a good look at the person on your right. Like me, you're probably convinced it ain't either one of them. From this moment forward, think of yourself as that third person. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. So how does a person who was born in rural India amidst a karmic mindset and a different worldview grow up to become a motivational speaker espousing positivity across the world? What is that transformation about, and how does it look? But like anything else, everything would have its own little backstory. Very early in my career in America, I ran across a salesman. His name was Zig Ziglar. Many of you would recognize the name. Some of you think it's a sewing machine attachment. It really doesn't matter. It was a real person. I heard him at a conference much like this. And he started with something very simple, a very profound observation about life and living. He said, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. But that has to be a philosophy. It cannot be a tactic. As a struggling salesperson trying to make it in the business world, preoccupied with the growth of life, I was struggling with concepts that some of you may be struggling for. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. Money is not everything, but it ranks reasonably close to oxygen. When you need it, there never has been a substitute. See, money bought me a house. Actually, it bought me two. It'll never buy me a home with laughter. Money bought me a bed. It'll never buy me a good night's sleep. It bought me a good time. It won't buy me peace of mind. It bought me a companion. It won't buy me a friend. So there I was, struggling, hurting and hating every bit of every day, wondering if tomorrow was going to be the same as today. And along comes this motivational guy. He had a weird southern Mississippi accent. He seemed jovial. He seemed to be enjoying life. He was prancing up and down the stage. And he seemed genuinely happy to be in that room. Have you ever noticed some people would brighten up any room by leaving? You know, they walk around like someone's licked all the red off their candy. And I just was, for the first time in my life, I was genuinely happy. One of your native sons, C.S. Lewis, called that joy. Something that is fleeting, that the moment it's lost, you want it back again. And as he was talking, I wanted it again. I didn't understand what this was all about. And then I bought one of his books. And in that book, he said, everybody in this world wants the same 8 things out of life. To be happy, to be healthy, to be reasonably prosperous. And I know some of us in business want to be unreasonably prosperous, and that's okay. I've had money, I haven't had it. Overall, it's better to have it. But as I went through that, the list kept troubling me. To be happy, to be healthy, to be reasonably prosperous, to have friends, security, peace of mind, good family relationships, and hope. Isn't that the trifecta of living? Actually narrowed down in business sense, here's what he was saying. For 8 to 10 hours of the day, practice the skill that allows you to make a living. But for the balance of the time, invest in the will that allows you to shape a life. When will and skill come together in one cataclysmic moment for the very first time on God's green earth, you will have unleashed that 24-hour champion. See, 117 years after Amy Carmichael came to India, a guy from India comes to Belfast. How did Amy Carmichael put it? She said, we all profess to be strangers and pilgrims in search of a land we can call our own, and then settle in the most unstranger-like fashion exactly as if we were at home and intended to stay as long as we could. And then her postscript is so beautiful. She said, I don't believe apostolic miracles have died. Apostolic living surely has. And suddenly this man who was in the marketplace as a Christian, Zig Ziglar, was proving to me that none of us have to go to the ends of the world to prove anything. We just have to be good where we are. We need to inspire the goodness in others. We need to love and allow ourselves to be loved. And it was all so strange to me because I came out of that worldview that was very different. A worldview that was fatalistic. A worldview that said your past has already been determined, and because of your past, your present is already guaranteed, and because you can't dream, your future is already preordained. And now life began to take a turn. At the end of every seminar, he would do something unusual in the marketplace. He would say, the seminar is finished. I have taught you everything I need to teach you about sales, about customer service. But in 15 minutes, I'm going to share the real truth. And I was surprised. People had paid a lot of money to come and attend a seminar, and he didn't do anything that would upset them during the course of the seminar. But as they were about to leave, he said, in 15 minutes, I'm going to share the real truth. All are invited, not all are expected. Now, being an employee, I had to stand at the back of the room and listen. And that's when he gradually began to share with me what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to become a follower of Jesus. And my life's transformation was so gradual, but the results have been so radical. He presented it to me as 3 propositions. He said, first, you have to plan to believe in something other than what you think about. See, most of us wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, do I have a prayer at all? If the mirror ever said with that kind of hairdo, go back to bed, I think some of us need to listen to the mirror and rather go out in the world and make a mess out of it. But plan to believe. But I love the next statement that was given to me that radically altered everything. And I think some of you here are understanding exactly what I'm saying. He says you can make people's condition change with charity, but you can only alter their convictions with clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of thought. In business, one of the fundamental principles is what? Integrity. And in many of the previous breakfasts that you've had, the speakers have used that word, integrity in business. In fact, the story is told about a businessman who decided to bring that Greek philosopher Diogenes, who would go across with a lamp looking for an honest person. He brought him into his company. This is the hypothetical. And Diogenes goes into the marketing department, and they say, Diogenes, what brings you here? He says, I'm looking for an honest person. Then he goes into the accounts department, and they say, Diogenes, what brings you here? He says, I'm looking for an honest person. Finally, he goes to the shipping department, and the shipping department says, Diogenes, what brings you here? He said, I'm looking for my lamp. So somewhere along the line, we lose that perspective, because you can make a good deal with a bad person. Let me repeat that. You can make a good deal with a bad person. Within the confines of what CBMC does globally, and I've been a part of it in different parts of the world, one thing I've often looked at is it takes a group of people of like-minded thought to create that movement. But it has to come with that clarity. So the first step was believe in something different, something radically new. Now I have to go back to my own roots because I was raised in India. India is a very academic society. Now, I've today dog academics a little bit, but I've graduated from college with a master's degree. My bride has a master's degree. My son's an engineer. My mother, who was a child bride when she got married to my father, got her master's at the age of 75 before she died at 77. And my father, last year at the age of 83, got his PhD. I come from an educated family. But this I found very fascinating about my culture. If the man who is going to be your mentor has not been to college, you can't listen to them. And my mentor, Zig Ziglar, had never been to college. In fact, he would jokingly tell me, he said, son, I haven't been to seminary. I've yet to go to cemetery. But somewhere between womb and tomb, God's placed a call on my heart, and you're going to be my legacy. What are the odds that a man raised in the racist state of Mississippi would hire an Indian gentleman and make him his vice president of global operations eventually and send him as an emissary all over the world? He said, I remember the words of my mother, who had a 6th grade education. One day you will stand in front of a colorblind God. That love needs to exist in our businesses. It has nothing to do with what the other person does. It has nothing to do with what they sell or how they interact. My good friend Jay Rogers, a very successful businessman who has bought and sold at least 10 $10 million companies, says this. No matter who gets the deal, good or bad now, 20 years from now, we should be able to sit across each other face to face and have a meal with no bitterness. That's the first step, a condition. Planning to believe. The second is preparing to belong. The belonging is always the hard part of who we are and what we do. The belonging is always the hard part of trying to negotiate and navigate through life. The belonging is always the hard part because there's 7.2 billion people on planet Earth and there's not another just like you. We are unique in every attribute of that order. And it was hard for me to fathom that going to the West with that little money, a thick accent, and all of the isms and schisms that come. See, when I decided to prepare to belong, my definition of marketplace success changed. Success is not who you are in relation to the person sitting next to you. Success is who you are in relation to where you began and what you began with. It is always personal, and it is always an intrinsic journey, never a destination. That great preacher Adrian Rogers once said, failure is succeeding at the wrong things. He also said, if you don't feel the devil, you're probably walking in the same direction, but that's a little harsh. But the reality of this love that was promised to me as a belief, that was guaranteed to me as form of belonging, began to change. Now here I'm going to give you a couple of marketplace ideas in how you would raise up the next generation, even within your organizations. And we had the privilege of being in one yesterday where we saw that legacy transfer. Mr. Ziglar, who was an icon, and I was a little lowly person in his company selling books and tapes at the back of the room. What status did I have? But he promised me that within God's kingdom we were all equals. I'd never heard a marketplace person talk that way. Every boss of mine demanded something from me that was what made them look better. And he would say, son, can you imagine a man at the zenith of his glory calling a total stranger from another country son? He said, son, you are my legacy. I remember one day walking through the Dallas airport, and there was Captain America, Roger Staubach, the Dallas Cowboy football quarterback, the legend himself. And Roger Staubach and Mr. Ziglar began to talk. He said, Roger, how goes it? He says, oh, Zig, it's so good to see you. He says, Roger, before we exchange halos, say hello to the future. Making me believe I belong. If you can do that in your environments, if you can do that in your inner circle, if you can do that in your hierarchy, when you walk into your office just today after we're dismissed, and you see the front office person, and you see an external customer, praise the internal customer so the external customer knows that they have now earned the right to belong to you. So the first is that transformation of belief. The second is the preparation to belong. And then finally, the expectation to become something new. I humbly stand in front of you as someone who has now flapped these worthless gums in 65 countries on 6 continents. How can that scared immigrant have that kind of thing. It was a promise given to me. He says, if you do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. In fact, he would put it in such a colloquial way, it's so brilliant. He said, if you do the things you need to do when you need to do them, the day will come when you can do the things you want to do when you want to do them. You can play now and pay later. You can pay now and play later. That's when I began to realize that this Jesus was real. That this transformation that had to take place had to be so complete. It had to be unique in its ability to assimilate. It had to be clear in its ability, as Paul so eloquently put it at the start. He says, you can't ride two horses. It's virtually impossible. There is something that begins that cataclysmic change within. And suddenly, the profession began to change because I loved being in it. The marketplace became attractive. As Ed Silvoso says, those of you in business, some of you are anointed with the ability to do business. But if you do it with the right ethical boundaries, the solid biblical principles, the Christ-likeness that's centered, letting the Jesus in you find the Jesus in them, something miraculous begins to happen. Miraculous begins to transfer. One of the poems given to me very early was by Amy Carmichael. See, when I moved to the West, I began to understand what this love is to follow something you so desperately believe in. Amy Carmichael spent 55 years in India without a furlough. Folks, some of you I have met have been to India. And today, for the first time, I have seen the beauty of what she gave up to come to the dust-ravaged hovels of India to rescue those girls who were being sold into temple prostitution. In fact, when she died, she says, no grave will mark me, just a bird cage that my children can continue to feed into posterity, and the word Amma, which means mother. The poem that was given to me was by Amy Carmichael. It went this way. For prayers that ask that I may be sheltered from winds that beat on thee, from fearing when I should aspire, from faltering when I should climb higher, from silk and self, O captain free, thy soldier who may follow thee, from subtle love of softenings, from easy choices, weakenings. Not thus our spirits fortified, not this way went the crucified. For all that dims thy Calvary, O Lamb of God, deliver me. Give me the love that shows the way, the faith no hope would dismay, the hope no disappointments tire, and a passion that will burn on fire. And then she ends it this way, let me not sink to be a clod, make me thy fuel, flame of God. I can't wait to go back to India this time and try to find my way by effort to the southernmost tip, 60 kilometers from the very end of the Indian peninsula, where she served her entire life, trying to offer the beauty of this Jesus. In the marketplace, searching for fame and fortune, someone said, if I give you all the provision in the world, if I give you all the position in the world, if I give you all the success in the world, and I held back the one truth that could be life transforming, that would make you a better father, that would make you a better husband. See, one of the beauties of living is we all know how to love. If I ask people on the streets of this country or any other country in the world, what is love? All of them will say, it's an action. Some will say, it's an emotion. Very few people will accept it as a fundamental ethos. This heart, for those of you who are scientific by nature, this heart as a circulatory muscle will pump blood. And as my mother's gave out, she lost her fight. But this heart was designed for adoration. If it is going around this world just as a circulatory muscle, it will keep you alive. But if it is allowed to learn how to love and be loved, it will let you live. Karl Barth said, none of us can go back and make a brand new beginning. But all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending. So is there ever an age for this? We were joking around. David was saying he's learning now to play the guitar. And when Brad asked him the question, wow, you're learning now, he said, we're all learning. We just have different levels of skill. Pablo Casals was asked why he continued to practice the cello when he was in his advanced age of 90 and had already become a maestro. He said, I think I'm making progress. That's why Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, it is the learners who will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. Sometimes we need to get out of being stuck in a rut. Sometimes we need to tell ourselves, why is it? See, the very wise, and this goes back to Lewis 101. If you read his book, Surprised by Joy, which regardless of what you believe, I would encourage you to read. See, folks, I'm a very simple person. I'm not seminary trained. But this I do know. One, there is a God. Two, it ain't me. And three, it ain't you either. We got to realize that there's a reality in this world that begins to operate outside. And when Lewis in Surprised by Joy talks about having that happiness by seeing his brother's garden in a tin can, and then saying, I don't know what it was, but the moment it left, I wanted it again. How do we capture that kind of joy? See, happiness depends on happenings. But joy is undiluted, unadulterated, and pure. Fred Smith Sr. said joy is adequate. Is it adequate to raise our families? As a businessman, I've had successes, I've had losses. Some of you will attest to the same. We've had ups, we've had downs. As a salesperson, I realized this. Every salesperson I've ever met is either going into a slump, coming out of a slump, or in a slump. In fact, the other day I met a guy, he was in a restaurant and he was eating the salad, the $1.95 salad. And I saw him 5 days in a row eating the $1.95 salad. He had a bunch of paperwork on his table. I knew he was a salesman. I said, friend, are you on a diet? He said, no, straight commission. And some of you know what that means when there's more month left after the paycheck. The problem with working all our lives to leave an inheritance, those that get it really glad you're dead. But a legacy worth more than silver and gold, a name. I've traveled and I'm a bad father. I've been on the road for 25 years. I spend roughly 120 nights a year in a hotel room and with the solitude of my own thoughts, the most dangerous place for a man on the road to be. I missed every slow pitch game of my boy. I missed every recital. His mother raised him. Longest married single mom I know, my bride of now 32 years. I jokingly tell her, I said, sweetheart, if you ever leave me, I'm going with you. That's why I came to this conclusion. Marriage is grand, divorce $100,000. Some people find out the hard way. But when I asked my son, when he graduated from college, as I wiped the tear because she had given me a finished product, I said, did you ever miss your pop? He said, absolutely. But who will tell them about Jesus if you don't go? That's not me. That's his mother. See, I've had a poem with my son. I may never gather diamonds. I may never amass gold. My colleagues may consider me a failure when my business life is told. But if you can grow up godly, my boy, I'll be glad, for I know I'll be successful as your dad. I'm going to excuse the moms in this room today, but I want to leave a word of advice for the fathers. See, ladies, within God's amazing creation, he has given you an ability to love like none other in all of his creation. But guys, sometimes we get rigid because we are so driven. I've done enough prison ministry in America where 90% of the people occupying American prisons are men. 100% of them disagree or have a bad opinion of their father. And that was the day I made a decision to always give this every time I was given a microphone, is to ask fathers, please, do not let your children walk around with a hole in their heart where your blessing should be. Since the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, A Jewish father has done something to his children. God bless you, my son. I love you, my son. And then a hug or a kiss to either a son or a daughter. And that's why in American prisons, the percentage of people of Jewish origin is so minimal that they're not even counted as a category. Ladies and gentlemen, we will never solve the crime problem in this world or the disenfranchisement problem in this world until we solve the love relationship between a father and a son or a father and a daughter. It is vital. Now, as I begin to come to a close, I just want to remind you, in the center of your table, there are these cards. And I would request one person at each table to take ownership of the cards, and please pass them out. We would like you to put your name, your email address, and your phone number on there. And there are a couple of questions that are asked that are probably hinging on what I just shared with you. The first is to give your permission to notify the organizers about future functions via email. If that's your choice, please check that box. If you would like to discuss, something has moved in your soul, something has stirred you to ask more questions about the reality. See, man is tridimensional. We're mental, physical, and spiritual. Frustrated because we are trying to eke out an existence in a two-dimensional manner. The third dimension, the all-important dimension of that faith component, the living component of a living God indwelling in you, a promise given by Him when He said, I go away, but I leave with you a spirit. If you want someone to pray with you in private because you have some hurt or burden, please don't leave here. Make sure that one of us gets together with you so we can help you with some of those assurances. There's a box at the bottom which says comments. Give the name of the guest who brought you here, and check that box if you want a moment of private prayer. So why do this if I'm a marketplace guy? If all my life that's what I have been. I became a vice president of global operations, and I was riding the height of corporate glory. There was a time when I was speaking to 20,000 people twice a week with the legends of industry, the titans of enterprise, the captains of entertainment, moving from peak to peak. And on January 1, 2006, the voice is as clear as I'm speaking to you. It simply said, I've made you famous, now it's my turn. And I went in and resigned. I did not have a dental benefit or a mental benefit. I had no idea what the next phase would be, but I knew I would still be in the marketplace. A good friend of mine, Brad, has traveled with me. One of the things we help people, what people like this help me do, is one day I was speaking with him on a private conversation. And I said, why would you tag along with someone like me? What value would I add to you? You're 20 years younger than me. He says, what you allow me to give my people is truth. See, knowledge multiplies, but truth stays the same. Knowledge is learned, but wisdom is lived. We got more knowledge right now than at any other time in human history. The largest percentage of educated people trying to create a ruckus. If every high school dropout was broken in debt and every PhD was a millionaire, the world would have been a very different place. But as I've had the privilege of traveling the length and breadth of this globe and met some amazing people here who actually served time in many of the places I've been to, I've realized this. And one of this thing is the absolute. The absolute. The absolute certainty that that wisdom that is required, the joy that Lewis talks about, the passion that Amy Carmichael had. Wouldn't it be amazing if all of us had that little pep in our step, that little bounce to our ounce, that little excitement in our heart that says, you know what? I think it's going to work. I'll close with a story. Mr. Ziegler made me a promise about what to expect. He said, when you make this radical transformation, the things that are going through life right now as examples where you think you're being kicked to the curb will become the illustrations you can talk about later because you will see the evidence. And I didn't believe him. But recently I was in India. I set up a scholarship in Mr. Ziegler's name at a university in India, a place he would never see, nor they had heard of. After I finished speaking, a young man was waiting on the periphery. He was wearing what we call third me-downs. You know what hand-me-downs are. If you're a younger child, I got hand-me-downs. He was wearing third me-downs, which means they're discarded by the homeless. But he had a box in his hand which was oily and it had been wrapped in newspaper, which in India you know is a sweetmeat of some kind that he's bringing to you, a delicacy. He wore torn footwear. But as soon as he saw me, he fell at my feet. He said, "You're my teacher." I don't even know who this guy is. He said, 6 years ago, I wanted to get a job in one of those outsourcing call centers. And they needed someone of English. Someone said, "Hey, a guy from your village went to America and he teaches communication. Why don't you follow him on YouTube?" He said, "Sir, I started watching your YouTube clips." And then he paused. He says, "The biggest hurdle was me is you're a Christian. How can I follow you? But you seemed happy. You seemed excited." And I thought, what the heck? Then he looked at me. He said, "I'm still not a Christian. But I can tell you this. I have learned from you." And hear me carefully as I close. Consistency. Dr. Joyce Brothers said, "You cannot consistently perform in a manner inconsistent with the way you see yourself." Remember how I started. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. When you look in that mirror, change your self-talk to "Mirror, mirror on the wall, here I am, what's my call?" Hopefully this has given you some insight into what this living God can do as a transformation. I really appreciate the privilege of coming here. It's a dream in the making. Thank you for sending your people all over the world so that guys like me could hear and learn about what this beautiful country did for all of Christendom. Thank you all, and God bless you.